Good morning in Mexico City and good afternoon in Cairo. The National Autonomous University of Mexico, by its Vice Presidency of Humanities and its University Program of Studies on Asia and Africa, as well as the Embassy of Mexico in Egypt and the American University in Cairo through its School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, welcome all of you to this series, Latin America and the Arab World, which we are launching today. As a first webinar, we are introducing you the international relations of the two regions. Today, we have authorities from the embassies as well as from our universities. The international relations, His Excellency José Octavio Tripp is joining us, as well as Doctors Nabil Fahmy, the founding dean of the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, Professor Alicia, Director of the University Program of Studies on Asia and Africa from UNAM, and Dr. Ibrahim Awad, Professor of Practice of Global Affairs, Director of Center for Migration and Refugee Studies, Global Affairs and Public Policy at the American University in Cairo. Welcome, all of you, and we would love to hear some welcoming remarks from you. First of all, please, Dr. Nabil Fahmy, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Let me just simply add a few words of welcome on behalf of the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. We are really honored and feel tremendous pleasure in cooperating with our Mexican colleagues, both here at the embassy in Cairo, as well as virtually with the academic institutions back home, where as a School of Global Affairs, we make it a point to reach out around the world and we hold and deal with important issues. We have what we call the Tahrir Dialogue series, which we are doing this in that context, and a series that tries to bring the world to the Arab world and the Arab world around the world. We've had discussions with Europeans, discussions with Asians, and we are very pleased to start also a discussion between Arabs and Latin America. We live in a global village, and it's important to engage collectively on these issues. In today's environment and with the pace of communications and challenges, one of the most important things is to have better understanding of each other, to be able to put yourself in the shoes of others and to think critically in a positive sense about their interest and yours. To do that, as was just mentioned, what we have before us is an excellent team of practitioners and intellectuals and academics. I'm honored to have Ambassador Tripp with us here from Cairo and Ambassador Shamaa, the Egyptian ambassador in Mexico, from Mexico. But you also have two excellent moderators and two excellent speakers, Dr. Ruiz and Dr. Korany. I will leave most of the opportunity for the speakers to add voice here, but I just wanted to add one point at the beginning. I've always, as a former diplomat, I've always had the pleasure of engaging with Latin American diplomats. And one of the very interesting perspectives I drew from doing that was that they had if you want, a normative, legalistic approach to international affairs. And I don't mean this in the sense that they wanted to impose their opinions on those of others, but more so in that they always looked at things in perspective of international law and the rule of justice in international order. This is really the time for all countries, particularly medium-sized countries, to really go back to the roots and the foundations of an international order, which should be based on respect for law and order. I will be attentively listening to the commentators, how they add to this perspective, whether it's from your side or from the Egyptian and Arab side. And maybe at a later point, I may add some questions to this mix. But let me give it back to you and to our other collaborators, particularly Ambassador Tripp and Ambassador Shamaa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean. Now we would like to hear your words, Professor Alicia Girón.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, Mexico, and good afternoon, Egypt. It is a pleasure to UNAM, our National University Autonomous of Mexico, to have you here in this platform. There are so many things that we have to learn from the Arab world, but also you have to learn many things about Latin America. And we are very close because one part of our heritage is in the Arab world, because the Arab world were first in Spain, and then in Spain, when it was an imperial, they arrived all the heritage of you. We have it in many, many things, in our music, in our culture. So we, in this pandemic, the better way to renew our relations is closing our friendship between these universities, UNAM and American University of El Cairo. As coordinator and director of this program, welcome to UNAM, and we will enjoy a lot the beginning of this series, International Relations between the two regions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Alicia. Now we would like to hear Professor Ibrahim Awad, please.
Thank you very much. Let me say that it is also a great pleasure for me to have taken part in organizing this event. It's a pleasure because of personal reasons, but also, and more importantly, because of the importance of the subject and because it comes to fill a gap in academic and policy interests. The two regions, Latin America and the Arab world, share comparable histories, characteristics, and opportunities. Long histories since the early 16th century under Iberian, mainly Spanish, as well as Portuguese, rule on the one hand, and Ottoman rule on the other hand. Latin America has one common language, Spanish, with also Portuguese on the one hand, and the Arab world has one common language, Arabic, on the other. In Egypt's case in particular, modern nation building started at the same time Latin American countries became independent and started their own nation building in the first decades of the 19th century. The two regions belong to the third world or developing world or the global south, according to the concepts used since the 1960s. The two regions have unrealized development potential and also have similar visions of regional and sub-regional integration. At the same time, the two regions are dissimilar in several respects. One is in the New World with its pre-Columbian history, separate pre-Columbian history, and the other is in the Old World with its complex legacies. The geopolitical situations of the two regions are quite different, and distance separates them. Similarities and dissimilarities make the rationale for comparative perspectives. An additional element in support of the common interests in the relation between the two regions, Dr. Girón talked about the common heritage in Spain and in the Arab presence in Spain. But there is also an element, an important element, which is the large communities of nationals of Latin American countries originating in the Arab world, especially in Syria and Lebanon, as well as from Palestine in the case of some countries. These communities should be a bridge, a stronger bridge between the two regions. I'm sure the overview of the international relations of the two regions by Dr. Ruiz and Professor Korany, I'm certain, will allow us to draw some lessons about the commonalities and differences between the two regions. These overviews will be good foundations for future events. I personally hope that the overviews will encourage scholars and students to engage in comparative studies about the two regions. And I equally hope that the overviews will stimulate policymakers to reinforce the relations between them and to make use of the enormous potential these relations harbor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Awad. Now, let's proceed with the word from our ambassadors. First of all, Ambassador Khaled Shamaa, could you please provide your welcoming remarks? Your microphone is off, Ambassador.
You are muted, Ambassador.
Sorry.
Now we can hear you.
Hear me now? Okay, good. Good morning to all of you, dear professors, Dr. Ibrahim Awad, Dr. Bahgat, dear colleagues and professors from UNAM, my dear friend Octavio Tripp, Ambassador Tripp. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I would like to thank you very much for this tremendous work that you're doing. It is indeed very timely. I think we've exchanged some ideas with Octavio on that regard, with regard to the educational and cultural exchanges between Mexico and Egypt, not just in terms of the two countries. Impressive, strong, of a very poignant presence in the regions, in the respective regions, but also as centers of propagation of the respective cultures within the regions. And that's what makes our exchanges and our work together even more important. During the past few months, we've worked on both sides, whether through Octavio in Cairo, myself here in Mexico City, on enhancing cooperation between our institutes and universities. And therefore, I really applaud the step that you're taking today, this engagement, which I hope would lead really to some concrete projects, whether through exchange of ideas, tapping on each other's culture, which in some instances has similarities, yet at the same time has differences, which makes it more interesting for that interaction. I really look forward to hearing from you, listening to some ideas, and I hope that this really becomes another impetus to our concerted efforts to enhance our relations and our dialogues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador José Octavio Tripp, please, your opening statement.
Many thanks, Vania. Good morning, Mexico. Good afternoon here in Cairo. Just a quick intervention to say that it's a real privilege to take part in this webinar, hosted by two of the most relevant and influential universities in Latin America and the Arab world, UNAM and American University of Cairo. And also at the same time, it's a great pleasure to share this virtual space with a cosmopolitan audience. As far as I know, we have attendees from different parts of the world, several countries, Arab and Latin American countries. And I think that such diversity is a clear expression of the interest existing in one region in another to get to know each other and discover real and potential opportunities of collaboration. And frankly speaking, this is why I really celebrate not only the realization of this seminar, of this webinar, but the cooperation itself between two important institutions like UNAM and Universidad Americana del Cairo. I think that with initiative like this one, and let me say we are attending a concrete interest of students, researchers, businessmen, public officials, in order to create a better and more productive understanding between both regions. But this effort, and this is important to comment with you, this effort to bring both regions closer is not new. Before the pandemic, and thanks to the Mexican Agency of Development Cooperation and the Arab League, professors, researchers from Mexico, Egypt, Jordan, and Morocco had short but very fruitful stays in research stays in your universities, among others. And as a result of that, as a result of those exchanges, we are not only materializing this webinar today, but confirming our willingness to cooperate. And despite the obstacles created by COVID-19, and this horrible pandemic, in fact, has given us the opportunity to open a new window of communication. And it's going to be mutually beneficial if we take advantage of it in order to have a smart and intensive way of collaboration as we are doing today. So I want to conclude my remarks really congratulating UNAM and Universidad and American University in Cairo, but in particular, Dr. Nabil Fahmy and Dr. Alicia Girón for your permanent support, promoting a closer and more productive relationship between the Arab world and Latin America. And of course, to my colleague Khaled Shamaa, that he's extremely active doing promoting this kind of relationships. For the Embassy of Mexico, it's an honor to take part in this partnership. So without further ado, and according to the program, let's conclude declaring formally open the series Latin American and the Arab World, and particular this webinar, the international relations of the two regions. 3 minutes and 10 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. This is the end of the opening ceremony. Thanks for being with us. And now let's proceed to the webinar, the international relations of the two regions. Professor Alicia Girón, you have the floor. Thank you.
We are very happy. It's a pleasure to be here with crossing the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean to arrive to Egypt. Well, I'm going to present Maestro Ruben Ruiz. He has a bachelor's degree in history at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, master's degree in American history from the Dr. José María Luis Mora Research Institute. He is a full-time researcher at the Center for Research on Latin America and the Caribbean, and also is a professor of the Faculty of Philosophy and Letters, both at UNAM. He has published various book chapters and articles referring to religious plurality in Mexico and Latin America, on international relations of Latin America in the 19th century and 20th century, and on the history of the American 19th century. He has given lectures and courses of higher education institutions in Mexico, Latin America, the United States, and Europe, and he is currently director of the UNAM Center for Research on Latin America and the Caribbean. Please, Professor Ruiz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I'm really pleased to be here. It's an honor for me to be sharing some ideas with you people from Mexico and Latin America and the Arabic world. It's, I feel a little bit, overwhelmed by this presentation, for I am a historian. I am not a specialist in international relations, so my approach will be a little bit different from that of a person who does study international relationships. I decided to give it the title of Latin America and the Arab World, Kinship, Friendship, and Partnership, for there have been a lot more of these things than international relations or than trade, foreign trade, for instance. In this globalized world that we are living now, well, this has been growing, but the essence, the core of the relationship between the two worlds have been kinship, friendship, and partnership. Let me see. How can I, okay. Well, the main aim of this talk is to inquire something about two different, but about the relationship between Latin America and the Arab world. These are two clearly defined historical, cultural, geographical areas that are in search of a stronger association. That's what we are trying to find out, why and what's the basis for this effort to be done. My starting point is this: there's a paradox. There's a paradox that underlines all of the relationship between these two different worlds. On the one hand, we have strong cultural bonds, and that is, Alicia has talked about a little bit. Some other people here have shown no doubt. And we share also economic interests. Nevertheless, we are a little bit far away from international relationship. The amount of our trade is still very low, even though it's been growing in the 21st century. And the relations, the collaboration between educational institutions in both worlds is still very low. I really congratulate UNAM and Alicia Girón for this effort that she is doing here in UNAM about this, trying to get together these different worlds, and well, in this case, the Arab world with the Latin American world. Well, this is my starting point. We have several things that are creating strong bonds that really tie us together, and we have some economic interests that we can work on, but we are far away of reaching a goal about this. Well, for Latin America, there are historical features that we share with the Arab world. There are human ties that bind them together, that bind these two worlds together. And there are economic and political shared interests. These are the three main issues that I will address in my talk. Well, the first one, the historical shared features. Well, as Alicia told us before, Latin America has its roots in the history of Spain and Portugal, two countries in the Iberian Peninsula in Europe that were once a part of the Arabic world, that were part of this large conglomeration of Arabic institutions, Arabic nations, we could say, and that left there a very strong basis, a very strong features. Well, these very strong features, we share them, and we have them. And let me tell you about two of them. We in Latin America have several words, several concepts that come directly from the Arabic world. That's one of the things. And there are some other cultural issues, for instance, and I think this should be worked out a little bit more. The kind of religious commitment of both worlds is really interesting, for they have, let's say, different religions, but at the same time, they have strong feelings towards their own religion, and they share this idea of the religion as a very important part of their internal, their social soul. Well, the human ties that bind us together. On the first, I would like to emphasize the idea that from the mid-19th century, Arabic migration grew into Latin America. There has been a very important migration from different parts of the Arabic world into Latin America, into different parts of Latin America. And well, we cannot say the same about the Latin Americans going to the Arabic world until the beginning of the 21st century, where particularly Qatar is attracting very large numbers, interesting numbers of Latin Americans to go there, work there, do their living in there. So this flow of people going and coming is very, very important, for it is, I would say, the basis, I would say this roots and foundations of any important international relation, whether it is based on interest, political interest, economic interest. Well, this idea of having some shared identities is really, really important. And in Latin America, the migration from Arabic countries has been really, really important. It's more important in the terms of quality, in the terms of the part that they have had in building up our nations than in the mere numbers that they have been coming. Let's see about this. In the present day, it is thought that some 20 million people from Arabic descent live in Latin America, 20,000 people. That is 3% of the population. It's thought that in Latin America we are living 630 million people nowadays. Well, it's 3% of that. And well, this has been a presence that they have mingled in the population of our countries, and they have somewhat left aside their language. It is thought that only 1 million of these people of Arabic descent are still Arabic speakers. So, well, they have mingled in their new societies, and that shows in several different issues. Let me tell you something. Well, and these numbers, these figures are really impressive. For instance, in Brazil, 12 million people of Arabic descent, in Argentina 3 million, in Mexico 1 million, in Chile 450,000, and Uruguay 80,000, Peru 20,000, and from there even less. But the importance of this is, I repeat, is that these people have mingled in their new societies, but have kept some issues, some elements that defined, that identified them as proceeding, as coming from the Arabic world. This presence has been important in cultural, economic, and political life. On the one hand, we have here in Latin America, we are a little bit of nationalists here in Latin America. We are very proud of our countries, and that's something that has helped build our nations, but also it has been quite a problem in order to get good relationships with our neighbors and with close neighbors and with farther neighbors. But in fact, the people coming from Arabic countries have been accepted in Latin America, and there prevails an idea that they are hardworking, successful people, nice people, that they are part of our society and they can mingle with it and they can share with it and they can grow within it, and that's important. This growth can be shared, can be thought of in several issues. There are cultural issues that are a part of this, but let me tell you, in the economic field, well, the richest man in Latin America, Carlos Slim, well, he is of Arabic descent, for instance, and well, it is not the only one who has become very successful in this field, and well, they are people that are hardworking and that are successful, and that is something that is thought of in Latin American ideas. Well, but several presidents also in political terms, several presidents in Latin America are of Arabic descent. For instance, nowadays, at least three of them are of Arabic descent. Nayib Bukele of El Salvador, Luis Abinader from Dominican Republic, and Mario Abdo from Paraguay. They are all children of or grandchildren of people that came from the Middle East. And in the 21st century, several others are. It's just a list that just came to my mind. Michel Temer in Brazil, Abdallah Bucaram in Ecuador, Jamil Guamal also in Ecuador, Carlos Menem in Argentina. They are all presidents that, well, are of Arabic descent, but they keep this idea and they are thought of as people that are of Arabic ascendants. Well, Nevertheless, in spite of the fact that these people come to Latin American countries, work there, live there, make their living there, they build their families here, and well, they live here. There is a scarce interest in the knowledge and understanding of the Arabic world as such, even to these days. The interest of academic institutions in the Arabic world is still very young, And it's all, besides being very young, it still is very scarce, let me say it that way. And well, we have a very high interest in several cultural features of the Arabic world. Nevertheless, we do not try to understand them as well as we could. So there is this paradox again: the presence of Arabic people and the absence of interest in what they are and what they mean. Well, but in the 21st century, there has been growing an interest in furthering the relationship. And I cannot separate this growing interest from this idea that several people from Arabic descent have become important political leaders in Latin America. Let's see how it is. Well, I'll talk about economics later, but let me tell you that from the year 2003, President of Brazil, Lula da Silva, created this idea that southern Latin American countries and the Arabic world should have a better understanding of themselves and should build the instruments of a growing up relationship, diplomatic relationship, economic relationship, political relationship. And there in 2005, there was inaugurated the first summit of leaders of political leaders, not political leaders, presidents and heads of government from both sides of from both worlds. There have been up to now 4 of these summits: one in Brasilia, one in Doha, one in Lima, and one in Saudi Arabia back in 2015. They were considering about organizing another one in 2018 in Venezuela, but it was not possible then. Out of these summits, there have been growing number of meetings and trying to reach understanding and to build up agreements and trade agreements, for instance, and the such. Well, these have come to several to some interesting figures. For instance, from the year 2000 to the year 2008, the trade in between these two regions grew 3 times. 3 times. It was multiplied by 3. Now, even though it is an important growth, it is a growth that has not grasped the roots, grasped the most important part of the economic trade and interests in both sides of in both worlds. For instance, in 2011, the Arab countries imported from Latin America only 2.18% of their total international trade, a very low figure. And the Arab countries exported to Latin America 0.95% of their total international trade. So those are figures that should be kept going on. Of course, there is the oil industry that should be considered and that we have a common interest in it. But, well, there's still something that has to be worked out. Now, the 3 main aims of these summits between the two worlds, the Arab world and the Southern Latin American world, it's to further international dialogue, interregional dialogue, set aims and priorities for economic cooperation, and find new ways of disseminating culture and heritage. That is, they think that it is important to grow in these 3 different areas that are really important for the globalized world of today. And oh, well, I think I got stuck here. Well, my time is almost over, and what I would say is that there are really interesting and really important political issues. Of course, Arab world and Latin America has been standing on the same side of international politics. For instance, the participation in the group of the 27 non-aligned countries, and this idea of opening up the international institutions in order to give more voice to the countries that are not the metropolitan countries of the capitalistic and imperialistic world of the 19th and early 20th century. So I would leave it here, and thank you for your attention. Whoops. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ruben Ruiz. Professor Ibrahim Awad, could we proceed with your comments, please?
Thank you very much. In these 3 minutes, I would like to first thank Professor Ruiz for his very interesting presentation, and I'm very glad that we have coincided in the sense that the Arab communities, the nationals of Latin America, that are the products of migration from the Arab world, are a solid bridge and should give the rationale for reinforced relations between the two regions, relations which are not at the level that they should be given what the two regions share in terms of culture and in terms of human beings. Let me emphasize what Professor Ruiz said and what Professor Girón said before about the cultures that are. You go to Lima and you have a whole neighborhood of Mudéjar architecture, in fact, imported from Spain. This Mexican house with its patio is imported from, it is the Andalusian. So there is so much that is in common and should promote relations. When it comes to migration, I think it's very important to notice the integration, the successful integration of descendants of Arab migrants. They are completely Latino Americanized, and yet they keep some sort of memory of the land of the ancestors, which goes to show that humans from the Arab region can very well integrate and can very well contribute, whether economically, whether politically, whether literally. You have Jorge Amato, a great writer in Brazil, who also is of an Arab origin. There is a great deal that gives ground to hope for for closer relations between the two regions and for greater trade interaction, for greater culture, and for greater political interaction between the two regions. I do not want to go on and on, but again, I reiterate how glad I am that Professor Ruiz has emphasized the foundations that exist, that give reasoning, rationale for closer relations between the two regions. I may have questions later in the questions and answers period, and probably we could also ask the audience to probably raise questions through the chat function in Zoom, so that we can put them to Professor Ruiz and later to Professor Korany. Thank you very much.
Now let's proceed with our second presenter. Dr. Ibrahim Awad, could you introduce Dr. Korany?
Yes, it is with great pleasure that I introduce my very good friend, Professor Korany, to this webinar. Professor Korany is one of the foremost international relations scholars in the Arab region. He is a professor of political economy and international relations at the American University in Cairo, and he is the founding director of the university's forum, the AUC forum. He spent many years in Canada, where he was elected fellow of the Royal Society of Canada and honorary professor of the University of Montreal. He has been a visiting professor in many noted universities such as Harvard, Oxford, and Sciences Po at Paris. He spoke in many different forums like the British Parliament, the Danish Parliament, European Parliament. He has published 12 books, over 140 book chapters and articles, and he is in a very good position to speak about the Arab world. He was the lead author of the Human Development Report, the Arab Human Development Report in 2014, and we are very proud that he received in 2015 the International Studies Association Distinguished Global South Scholar for his award for his life contributions, and he was the first from the Arab world to receive this award. So Professor Korany will speak about the current international relations of the Arab world, the current situations, how the Arab world views the world, its perspectives on the world, its relations with the world, and how it deals with the issues that have affected it recently. Professor Korany, you have the floor for 20 minutes.
Thank you, Ibrahim, for this introduction. And I would like to join everybody in congratulating whoever has established that needed example of cooperation between Latin America and the Arab world, because we need more and more of collaboration between countries of the Global South. And I hope that the different talks will actually lead to more knowledge of our different regions. Here at this end, we don't know much about Latin America. When I discuss with some of my students, they have general ideas. And perhaps I'm happy that my talk and Professor Ruiz's talk could be complementary without knowing that. He has emphasized very much the interaction and historical roots between Latin America and the Arab world. And I was asked to focus much more on the international relations of the Arab world, with the idea is that if we really want interaction, we have to know each other. We have to know the different aspects, problems, strong points, joint objectives, but also differences. And in this case, we can establish a good basis for interaction. I had a slight problem about organizing my talk, because I said, probably for many experts in the Middle East, I will be talking about things that are very well known. Yet for some people in Latin America, I need to give more and more clarification. I tried to make a compromise, and I hope I will not miss either Latin American friends or my Middle East experts. And actually, let me then start by having the PowerPoint. And what I will do in the few minutes I have, I'll start by two most recent events and try to link them to what I think are basic characteristics of shapers of international relations of the Arab region. The first event, actually almost a month ago, was the blocking of the Suez Canal. A huge boat, a huge ship, either because of weather or some other human error, has misfunctioned and blocked the Suez Canal sideways. The Ever Given is higher than the Tour Eiffel. And people say that it weighs more than the big pyramid of Egypt. There was a worry that in order to solve this problem, we might need weeks, especially emptying the containers of the Ever Given. But thank God, the whole problem was settled within 6 days, from March 23rd to March 29th. But we were reminded of a few facts. One, Egypt was losing per day between $9 and $10 million. Global trade was losing about $9 billion per day. As the canal represents, the passage in the canal represents about 12% of global trade, including 60% of oil tankers. And in fact, during the 6 days the canal was blocked, about 325 ships were blocked either from the south, from the Red Sea going to the Mediterranean, or from the Mediterranean going to the Red Sea. And obviously, we were reminded of how important the Suez Canal was for the global system. And from there, the strategic location of the Middle East. That's one event. The second event I would like to mention is of a few months ago, entitled the Abraham Accords, of a different type from the Ever Given. The Abraham Accords are about normalization agreements between Israel and 4 Arab countries: Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Morocco, and the Sudan. What is important about these accords, which were actually done under the pressure of the former American administration, is that they have involved countries that were not really at war with Israel. And they resulted not in peace agreements, but in normalization and almost partnership. Obviously, as I will emphasize soon, any aspect that reduces conflict in the Middle East should be welcomed. The region is a highly conflictual region. And I mentioned in my outline, its population represents less than 6% of world population. But they are involved in 17% of world conflicts, 3 times as much. I don't have time to go into all the conflicts, but what is important about the Abraham Accords is that it emphasized relations between states, but it didn't add much to the core aspect of the conflict, the Palestinian issue. And that at this level, we are still in a stalemate. If I have time, I'll come to most recent events, and especially a recent report about how to find a way out. At this level of conflict, let me say that they are multiple. I call them complex and multi-layered. And this is why conflict resolution doesn't advance as fast as we want. Let me finish this aspect by attracting attention to a new type of conflict that we will be seeing more and more of, what I call potential water wars. And water is very important in a desert region like the Arab region. Of the 10 most stressed countries about water, 7 are in the Middle East. So the issue of water is basic. Keep that in mind. We have a huge crisis now between, on the one side, Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia about building of an Ethiopian Renaissance dam, which Sudan and Egypt, as downstream countries, are very worried about its effects. Egypt counts for living really on the Nile for 95% of its needs, including agriculture. Less water means food insecurity for Egypt. So that is one important dimension that I think will be more and more present in the future. Perhaps a different point related to the Abraham Accords is the Abraham Accords were important for Israel because they were with 2 important oil countries. I mean, relations between Israel and many of the Gulf countries are an open secret. They have been going on for years. But their formalization brought to the open a certain partnership with Israel. We know about the importance of oil and how these countries possess about 2/3 of world oil reserves. But I want to mention one important aspect about the impact of this oil wealth that is usually under research, that we don't talk very much about. And that is the idea of remittances. Because many of the Gulf countries have small population, but yet lots of petrodollars and lots of development plans. They had to count on foreign labor. From other Arab countries, Egypt, Jordan, Palestine, Morocco, Tunisia, but also from South Asia, Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. The remittances that this foreign labor used to send back home was a very important element of the economies of these countries. For many countries, between 12 and 15% of GDP. And hence you can imagine now that with COVID and the slowing economic growth in Gulf countries and sending back home many of the labor force, the impact on the economies of these countries. Not only less foreign currency coming to them, but the returning labor will increase the ranks of unemployed in these countries. Here we see really a huge impact of at least one region of the Arab world, the Gulf countries. I want now to come to an important shaper characteristic, third one, of the Arab international relations, and that is what is well known and usually perceived about the region, religiopolitics. We shouldn't forget that this region is the cradle of the three basic religions in the world. And as a result, religion is very important. I mean, for some people, it is like liberation theology in some Latin American countries. So it is related to identity, is related to legitimacy of the state. Many leaders, actually, I mean, the king of Saudi Arabia, the official title is the commander of the faithful, the guardian of holy places. The king of Morocco is called commander of the faithful, which is the original title of the prophet. And many regimes try to connect their leadership to kinship with some members of the prophet's family. So religion is basic. And hence the rise of Islamic movements. They have a huge base to build upon, to use and abuse at the same time. And in a few months, we will commemorate one of the important international spillovers of religion, the attack by Al-Qaeda against the trade towers in New York. I don't know, probably some of you remember the images there of the planes going into these towers. I remember I was teaching at the time that this took place, and I thought I was looking at a movie when one of my students showed me the mobile, the cell phone, and I thought that he was showing me just part of a movie. So that is a third shaper of international relations. Obviously, as I put here in the title, from identity politics to immigration, whether regular or irregular, and Islamophobia. And that is an important international spillover of domestic religious movements. Remember, the rise of especially violent or jihadist Islamic movements reveals one important thing. An important element of the state according to Max Weber and others, it affects the state's monopoly in the use of force. The state loses its control over its own society. And the result is that we have lack of authority, and in some countries, just chaos. A push out of lots of people who see that their countries are going nowhere. And hence, an important international spillover is international migration and its impact in the receiving countries. I don't know how I am doing as far as time is concerned, but I want here to just come to a sort of conclusion and raising some questions that we perhaps can develop during the question and answer period. First of all, is that looking at the international relations of the Arab world or of Latin America, we have to be mistrustful of some of the dominant frameworks that we have now, and that emphasize very much the, what I call the tip of the iceberg, former sovereignty in interstate relations. In order to understand the international relations of the Arab world or of Latin America, I suppose, we have to go beyond the formal aspect of the state and look at social dynamics inside, as I have tried to do about remittances, about Islamic movements, and the rest. And I mentioned in my outline two cases. One, Syria, which has been going through a huge, bloody civil war for 10 years, with 600,000 people dead, destroyed infrastructure, and between the internally displaced refugees and international refugees, almost half of Syria's population. But Syria has also lost, because of foreign intervention, its sovereignty over its decision making. The ones that really impact what is taking place in Syria at present are Iran and Russia, but also Turkey and Israel go in and out as much as they would like. Another example that we don't talk about very much, and that also draws attention to social dynamics and their international spillover, is Lebanon. Lebanon used to be called, and that is important for people of Lebanese descent in Latin America, used to be called the Switzerland of the Arab world. And we can give details about how pleased many Arabs used to go and visit Lebanon and enjoy their holidays up there. But Lebanon at present is a failed state and on the brink of being a humanitarian catastrophe. In 1 year, it has lost about 70% of its GDP. Within a week, inflation has been going by 300%. There is almost a danger, not only poverty is increasing, but there is a danger of starvation. So here,
Doctor, could you please proceed to your concluding remarks?
As I said, we cannot just understand what is going on by concentrating on sovereign interstate relations, but as I showed in that outline, we have to go to social dynamics. Two important points that are mentioned here, and that is the idea that, as a general conclusion, at present, Pan-Arabism as a political aspect is declining in favor of cultural interconnectedness. And satellite channels and social media are helping very much that aspect. I suppose the unity of language is similar to what exists in Latin America. Mm-hmm. Second point, and that is really my conclusion. Is there anything positive there? I would say that, contrary to many developed countries, there is an important demographic asset in the Arab world. That region has two-thirds of its population as youth, below 29 years old. And I know from living in Canada and in North America that developed countries are worried about aging population. The Arab world has a huge treasure and asset in its youth, which is an element not only of new mindset, new thinking, but also creative projects and dimensions, if properly invested in. So this is why I still look at the Arab world with optimism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Korany. I have taken some points. I have been writing to comment your excellent paper, but I was thinking many years ago, well, not many years, 3 decades ago, 4 decades ago, we were part of the third world, the countries of the third world. And I don't know why right now, as Mexico is in the OECD, and now we are an emerging countries, but the problem is that we haven't had a development, an economic development in good terms. Why in good terms? Because Egypt and Mexico had the same problems. We have the problem of migrations. We don't have employment as the same in Egypt. We live of the remittance of our colleagues, our Mexican colleagues in the USA. You receive a lot of money by the remittance. Another problem that we have behind us is the service of the external debt, which is crossing our countries. So you have, I would like to point 2 things. One is that you are the center of the 3 most important religions in the world. This is very, very important. But I was also wondering, since the First World War, how the empire countries cross your nations, make new frontiers, that now you have a huge problem in the Arab world. So we must think more what we must do, because when you put the example of this evergreen ship that during 6 days was stopping the commerce between the global commerce, this is incredible because Egypt and the Suez Canal, you have a power in your hands. And you can negotiate many, many things with that power, closing or open the ships that comes around the world. And this is politics, this is geoeconomic, and this is how we must have new ideas to have a better development in our countries. I would like to continue talking, and it has been very interesting. also the Abraham Accords, how they have been constructed by the USA. It is very important. So thank you very much. But now I think we have some questions. One is the CRLAC Civil Society Initiative tried to engage in an active dialogue between the Arab world and Latin America and the Caribbean. How can it be revived and energized? Then I'm going to read 2 questions, and then I will give you the floor to Professor Ruben and also for you, Professor Korany. The other question is, do you think the post-pandemic surge in virtual means of communications used for cultural and scientific interactions will help overcome the impediment of physical distance and open new doors of exchange between the 2 regions? How can both sides help in fulfilling this potential? Maestro Ruiz, I give you the floor.
I think that, well, as Professor Awad said, the migration from Arabic countries into Latin America has been very successful because they have mingled within the population. So it is not easy that they would go back in order to push a diplomatic thrust in order to enhance the relationships between the two worlds. I was saying that the politicians that have achieved success in their Latin American countries with having these Arabic origins have been very important in furthering this, and the diplomacy has been also very important. I think that it is more this idea of the defining the interests of the political order in both sides of the table that will help in this, because of the distance on the one hand, and because also that there are very, very special interests, economic interests that could be enhanced. This thrust of diplomatic relations have given has increased the trade, has increased trade, for instance. And well, we have some kind of complementing economies. We have to find out which are the commodities that can be transported and can be of interest in one part or the other. Nevertheless, I would go back to the beginning of my presentation, saying that this migration and this closeness in terms of cultural identity, in terms of understanding the world, can be a very useful instrument for that. But I would say that, I dare say that there can be more important thrust coming from the public order than the society itself.
Professor Korany, would you like to?
Yes. Certainly. I mean, we remember that golden era of non-alignment and the huge collective front between third world countries, and especially the group of 77. And I know that many people were very impressed with the dependency theory that came initially from Tripp and the ECLA, the Economic Commission for Latin America. I think if I can give a sort of answer to your question, the collectivities still exist, but at the formal level. Many of the countries that constituted and constitute the third world have been dominated very much by their domestic problems. And they haven't really added up to their ambitions of establishing especially economic relations among themselves to present an important unified front as a global level. If we just follow the deliberations in the World Trade Organization, we can see how marginalized the global South is. I'll come to the Suez Canal afterwards, but it seems to me that one important aspect that can bring many of the global South countries together is to discuss the prevalent economic model, the neoliberal model that is dominant at present, and see how far they can actually restructure it, reform it, or reorient it. Concerning the Suez Canal has been on and off for some years. I mean, after the war of 1967, it was closed for about 8 years. Egypt, and I agree completely with Egypt in this respect, shouldn't use the Suez Canal as a national policy aspect. There is an international agreement. Egypt has to run well the Suez Canal and has to respect its international responsibilities. Because remember that if the Suez Canal stays closed for a long time, tankers will get accustomed to use an alternative route, go around Africa rather than using the Suez Canal. And there are increasingly now talk about competitive projects for the Suez Canal. So it is in the interest of Egypt and in the world that the Suez Canal is open, runs efficiently, and runs objectively too. It cannot be used as just a tool or an instrument of a national policy.
Okay, Professor Korany, we also have the Panama Canal. So maybe we must have we must share a strategic, economic, and geopolitical goal to change things. We have 2 more questions. I will read it very fast, so we almost are on time, but I would like to read it. The first one is Amal Murad. Do you think the post-pandemic surge in virtual means of communication used for cultural and scientific interactions will help overcome the impediment of physical distance and open new doors of exchange between the 2 regions? How can both sides help in fulfilling this potential? And Ibrahim Mohildin, the presence of evangelical churches in the political life of various Latin American countries has been in the rise in recent years, clearly seen in the outcome of the many elections held in the region. A clear example will be the victory of Bolsonaro in Brazil. With considerable popular endorsement, they have succeeded in boosting conservative prospects in large parts of Latin America, thus affecting internal politics as well as external relations with other countries. As a result, we have witnessed a change of heart in Brazil in front of the Palestinian question. How damaging can this be to future relations with the Arab world? And is there any remedy? Please, Professor Maestro Ruiz, would you like to answer? And then I will give the floor to Professor Korany, please.
Well, this issue about the evangelical church's rise in Latin America, in fact, in the whole of the Western world, except in Europe, is a very important and complex issue. And let me just point to one example. Nayib Bukele, whom I said was an example of these people of Arabic origins that reached the power. Well, he is a Christian. He hasn't accepted publicly that he is a Christian, and he hasn't made a political moves founded on his on his faith. Nevertheless, I'm a little bit critical about this idea that it has been the evangelical churches that have pushed the conservative thinking in Latin America. For instance, in Colombia, the evangelicals are charged with the idea that the referendum about the peace treaty between the government and the guerrillas was set back. Well, in fact, they held ideas that were structured and that were well fundamented in the Catholic Church, in the dioceses of Bogota, as far as I remember. So this makes this a little bit different. As far as I can see, in Latin America, they haven't affected the idea of the relationship with people from the Middle East, neither Arabic countries or Israel, for instance, as far as I can see now. I can tell about tomorrow, but I think that it's a really complex question, and I think that that your program should make an interesting meeting like this about this phenomenon of the importance of the diversity of religions in Latin America and the relationships with Africa and Asia. I'm not really sure about this will be a problem for the relationship with Arabic countries.
Professor Korany.
Yes, concerning, I understand the question is concerning COVID, and I would say that COVID had, at least for our topic, two important results. One, it shows the importance of inequality, internationally and nationally. Mm-hmm. Number two, as far as many countries around me I see, and including Egypt, it showed also the challenges for health services. I mean, we see a glaring case in India at present, where there is no oxygen. So these two aspects, I think, inequality and the development of health services, could be an important item of negotiation and coordination among third world countries. If you allow me, I have a question to concerning Latin America. I wanted to present to my colleague here and to you all. I remember I visited Venezuela twice, and I was very impressed with this country. And yet, what is happening in Venezuela at present, it is more than a failed state. What happened? How come the Venezuelan prosperous country became a failed state and a human catastrophe? And how could that be repeated or not in other Latin American countries?
Okay. Professor Korany, we almost are on time, and I have to give the minutes to our ambassador and also to Professor Nabil Fahmy. But what I have written all your ideas and also the ideas that Professor Ruiz. And with this, you have given the next steps to profundize more issues in between the Arab world and the Latin America. And we must not forget that we have Samir Amin, and we have Celso Furtado, and we have a great fathers in our the development theory for these countries. Thank you very much, and I will the microphone to Vania. Please, Vania.
Thank you all. Let's proceed to the closing ceremony of this first webinar. Please, Ambassador José Octavio Tripp, share your final remarks.
Many thanks, Ivania. Taking into consideration that our Arab and Egyptian friends will be concluding their fast in few minutes, the best contribution I can do in this segment is to be quick and concise. So first of all, I want to thank Professors Ruiz and Korany their presentations. Both of them were not only didactic, but quite interesting. No doubt that they will be, both the presentation will be extremely useful as a general introduction for future webinars of the current series. The number and diversity of questions asked during the session, I had the opportunity to read some of them and posted. It was a true expression of mutual interest existing in both sides in order to, with the idea of to learn more about each other. I really thank all the attendees of this webinar as well, their contribution and enthusiasm. Both elements are an outstanding incentive in order to continue with this kind of efforts. And it's evident that there is a lot to do in order to improve interactions between Latin America and the Arab countries. But today we made a concrete and significant contribution in that way. So we have a good reason to feel happy and be ready to attend next webinars. The next webinar that we have in agenda with your support about universities. So many thanks all of you. Let me conclude saying Goya UNAM, Goya Universidad, and Ramadan Karim to our Muslim friends. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Please, Dr. Nabil Fahmy, could you please provide your closing statement?
Sure. Thank you very much. I will be very brief. Let me first start by saying, again, what I said at the beginning. We are really very pleased to engage in this cooperation, not only from the educational perspective, but from the societal perspective as well. I think what we've heard today is a very good beginning. It raised a tremendous number of questions. I personally have many, but I refrain to give time to the audience. I think in the future, we should really get deeper into our societal inclinations on both sides so that we understand each other better. I think we need to give a lot of emphasis also on youth, since that's really what determines the future. And I would suggest also that your countries and ours played an important role in establishing the world order, although we were not the superpower victors of post-World War II. It's important for us to engage again in one form or the other, particularly the intellectual community, in trying to determine what are the norms and procedures that should govern the international order in the future. So my sincere gratitude to all of you on both sides, the Egyptian side and the Mexican side, who have put this together, and my congratulations on this very good beginning.
Thank you, Doctor. This is the end of the webinar. We hope to see you next time, and please follow us on our social media so you can be connected. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.